Hello, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, wherever you are. This is our 8th show of Eat NATO for Breakfast. I'm Franziska. I'm speaking to you from Berlin. I'm a member of the European Secretariat of the International People's Assembly, and this show is part of the Peace Summit Madrid 2020, a unitary space for organizing towards the NATO summit, which will take place in June this year in Madrid. Check out our website, sign our declaration, bring your friends to work with us in creating a People's Summit for Peace while the NATO people are meeting also. Today with me is Gitte Sætre from the Anti-War Initiative in Norway. Gitte, good morning. Before we get right into it, I want to know how you're doing, where you're actually located, and well, what's your favorite breakfast beverage? Because this is always something we do here, since we do call it Eat NATO for Breakfast.
Yes. Well, first of all, thank you, Franziska, for inviting. Anti-War Initiative and myself is, of course, very grateful that you want to know more about how it is to be a member state of NATO and have a border with Russia. But we're going to get into that later. First of all, I am in Stavanger at the moment, visiting a colleague within the arts that died 150 years before I was born. So I'm very into history and time at the moment. And normally at home, when I'm having my favorite beverage in the morning, I eat NATO for breakfast, actually, because because I live very, very close to North Europe's largest NATO base, marine base. So I can see the warships passing through the coastline, warships and submarines driven by nuclear power. So eating a NATO for breakfast is familiar, but it's much nicer to be with you, I must say.
That's so interesting. I have to go on a tiny detour. I already told you, Gitte, that Stavanger was on my list of first places to visit ever. I grew up in the East, and so going to Norway was my first journey out of Eastern territory, and it was very interesting because when I visited Stavanger, the person we visited made the effort to show us the bunkers and military leftovers, remnants of fighting the Germans in the Second World War. So that was very interesting. That obviously Norway is, playing a very, very significant role in like military history of Europe. But I'm sure to some extent we will even get into that. In the past shows of Eat NATO for Breakfast, we've looked at NATO's founding, we have looked at the history during the Cold War, and also the new Cold War against China. We have looked at the unfolding conflict in the Ukraine, and in the last episode, we spoke with Sarah and Carrie from Abolish Frontex about Europe's hypocrisy in dealing with refugees of different origin. And for people who really like to read and don't like to listen so much, we actually always try to produce articles of the shows that we do. A short article to summarize what we discussed here in the show, and also to pick up some of the questions that sometimes come up in the comments. We often don't get around to addressing them in the show, but then we try to pick them up in the article. So if you're interested in that, you can check it on the People's Dispatch website. I think we will see the link in the comments, in the public comments section, so you can check out the articles of the last show. All right. Now, so far we've tried to show how NATO actually works in a more general term, as an organization that is like destined to bring, conflict and war, despite its assurances to the opposite. But what we always felt that it was really important to really understand what actually holds it together. What is it like to be a member state of NATO? How does that feel? For example, in recent conversations with Vijay Prashad, he puts it that NATO is the Trojan horse to bring American hegemonial foreign policy into Europe. Now, if that is the case, then we should look at actually who are the Trojans in this geopolitical power play, who willingly open their doors to this Trojan horse, to NATO, who open their doors and invite them in and are complicit in working with NATO. And we want to know, how does this play out? How do governments actually, European governments, advertise NATO membership to their voters? What are the real costs behind it? What are the hidden costs that people don't even know about? And we will explore all of these questions, in this case with Norway. One of the reasons for that is because at the moment there's actually the military exercise Cold Response, which sees NATO members and troops and allies practice for war in cold weather conditions. And they are hosted by the Norwegian Armed Forces. And we felt that maybe at this particular moment it would be particularly interesting to look at Norway. So we start with some basic facts. I'll give it over to Gitte in a moment. Since when is Norway in NATO? How did that even happen? What were the reasons? What does it mean? What are the conditions of membership? Why is Norway part of NATO but not of the EU, etc., etc.? Give us some basic updates, explaining NATO and Norway for us. Go away.
Yes, I think we have to go actually back to the Second World War. That is very present at the time now, after the Russian invasion in Ukraine. We are all kind of traumatized by the Second World War, and this has really come to play the drama again. And for the Norwegian government, who was living in UK during the Second World War, they were lobbying very hard for this. Of course, NATO was not a name. It came in 1949, but Europe was very traumatized by not having United States helping us out in the early years of the war. So when this happened, of course, it didn't make a big difference to the outcome of the war. So this is like the basic fundament of this relation. And then things have had different changes according to the tension between United States and Soviet Union, or Europe and the West towards Soviet Union. And in 1991, the tension was low. And then it was not easy to sell NATO and the huge amount of money spent on weapons. So then we were also trying to demolish and demilitarize, and things were going in a more peaceful direction. And also they started to discuss more of doing out of area operations. And then we had the war in Yugoslavia and the wars in the 90s, and then eventually. So it's following into the geopolitical tensions, and a lot to do with economy, no? So that is something that we have to bear in mind. But I would like to go back to the year where Norway entered into NATO in 1949, because as one of the original 12 members, it had been a long period prior by the US and the British government, especially, to have a systematic preparation of those 12 governments, and it was sold in as a way of being a bridge builder between United States and Soviet Union, especially in Norway and those countries bordering, like Ukraine. No, it's actually the translation of Ukraine. It's like a border country. So and also an important thing that was sold in with NATO was that the Norwegian social democracy parties on that side would shape and develop and appear as a bridge builder between United States and the Soviet Union. So shape and develop and bridge builder is the key words here. So that is why a lot of people are more and more critical to NATO, or at least have been before Putin went to war a month ago, is that, it's not such a peace keeping organization. Yeah, so I'll stop there.
Why? I think that makes sense that Norway would consider itself, because it is bordering, like the Cold War part, I think is to some extent understandable. Many people felt that after the fall of the Soviet Union, that things would shift, that NATO somehow had, well, lost its legitimacy, or wasn't actually, simply wasn't necessary anymore. How do you view? I find it very interesting because, again, Norway is not a member of the EU. Do you think there is an interest, or, I mean, after 1991, there could have been an interest in actually thinking of a more common European security solution, of thinking of building up a Europe that actually might be ensuring peace a lot more? Because it seems that when we're looking at the current conflict, that some of it may have been, well, it's always in hindsight, whatever, it doesn't help, but integrating, for example, Russia into a common security proposal, into its own. There's always the call by Macron and all these people that Europe needs to have its own security force and needs to develop its own security, which would, of course, should include all of its eastern neighbors, and not build another front. Is that a conversation in Norway, or why is there the hesitation towards Europe, but obviously an embracing of, as you mentioned, like US or UK allyship, at least in the military sense?
Yes, I think it has a lot to do with money, because it's super expensive for Norway or other countries in Europe to have their own defense system. So being a part of NATO and having United States as the big brother, we can get away with less budgets. But of course now we are up to 2% of the national GP. But still, that's one thing. And then I think it's like history. We kind of lock ourselves in what have happened before. It's very difficult to break a pattern, because then you are very vulnerable, and people don't dare that. So that's why we have so much nuclear weapons, right? I mean, this super need of feeling secure. It's very intricate and difficult to break in a way. But so in a way, I understand Macron and this need of building up Europe, because the threats are coming a lot of the times outside. But then again, we will never break this pattern of using militarization and fear and base our security on war and weapons. I mean, that's not a very modern way of thinking, no? So we have to change that. But how?
Yeah. I would be interested at the moment, because so I read a little bit about it. At the moment, there's actually, because of the military exercises taking place in Norway, there is actually, I don't know, 30,000 soldiers from 27 different countries in Norway, and there's actually warnings that there will be more traffic on the road, etc., etc. So don't be alarmed if you see soldiers. So to me, that would be an interesting question in relation to what you just said. A feeling of, I don't know, security or whatnot, or bringing up, like, is an army actually something that secures us, or does it not? Is it really secure? Is it really peaceful to have the most nuclear weapons in order to make sure that nobody attacks? Like, these types of questions. So I was wondering, at the moment in Norway, I assume by these warning signs everywhere, that military is actually quite visible. As you said, when you eat breakfast, you get to see the warships cruising from your terrace in Bergen. How is the military how is that perceived in Norway, in the general population? Like, how does that, is there debates around, the points that you are raising around general militarization, around this archaic, we build up a weaponry and an arsenal of, allies and bring soldiers here. So this would be one question, how that is perceived for the people. And then the next question for me, because you raised that topic already, as far as economics are concerned, is military as such for Norway actually a big business? From selling weapons to having, to being the host of the NATO base, this or that. Like, these would be two, because they're probably interrelated. How the public views the military, probably, or the military aspects of Norwegian society probably has to do with how much of an employer, how much of a of economic economic aspect this is in Norwegian society. So I would like to link these questions to figure out what the general conversation in the Norwegian public is in regards to NATO and military in general.
Yes, I think I will start by saying that even though we have been a NATO member since 49, our politics and our constitution, it's built upon a friendly relation with Russia. So we have, for instance, rules that says that we will not have any foreign troops on Norwegian soil unless we are under attack. And no nuclear weapons. But things have changed slightly since our relationship with the NATO, and also our what do you call that, agreements with US directly. And these cold respond and trident junctures that we had in 2007 are becoming larger and larger, and we are more visible in the air. So yeah, the tension is there, as we all know. But then again, these exercises has always been there, and Russia knows, and they are invited to participate in all this. So in one way, they are necessary, but if you believe in this system, right? And why Norway? Because of the cold weather and the conditions, and you don't ruin the nature so much when the soil is frozen, but you do ruin a lot of fields for food, and you mess up the nature and society for a long period. And maybe the worst of it all is that media and the military itself invites the public to sit on these like benches and watch the show. And they even like invited people to bring their champagne. So that's like a image that tells you a lot of of how it all comes to play. And the media is not asking a lot of critical questions. So it's more like a thing that we have to do, and it's bringing us security. But lately, activists have pointed out what damage the military does when they are acting out wars, when they're exercising, when they're producing weapons, building NATO bases and American bases. I mean, this climate print this industry or this culture represent is really, really high. Just think about the F-35 planes, how much fuel they use per hour. And I mean, but they are never included in any climate budget. So, and then you're talking about security for whom? Yeah, so I think that's a possibility there to link peace movement and climate movement. into a fight there to point into these numbers, because it's really, really bad. But then, yes, weapon industry. Norway have had weapon industry for many, many years. We make weapon, but mostly like parts of elements that goes into military surveillance and different part of the production. But so this is a way of not pointing it like we are delivering these and that weapons, but the numbers are high, and the collaboration with Martin Lockhart in US are high. So you have this weapon deal. So if we buy 52 F-35 planes from the United States, they buy this and that from us, and this, yeah. So that's friendly, how the friendship is based. Yeah.
You briefly raised the point about Norwegian laws and the Norwegian constitution and what is allowed and what is not allowed. How is the government? I read somewhere that the government is actually trying to change laws, but also not following necessarily all the laws that are in place for this. Is that something that has been, exposed by the media? Is this something that for example, the Norwegian public cares about, that their laws are being, because it's all fine and good to have awesome laws that that are meant to secure the democracy in your country. But then if these are not adhered to, or if these are maybe not easily, but if these are changed according to whatever rules or emergency, then that all becomes a bit of a fig leaf of democracy. So is there a sense, like, what are some of the instances where Norway has actually not followed its own constitutions or its own constitution or its own laws? And do you see currently, maybe this is also has to do with the current situation, because this is what we see in our country, what we see in Germany, that suddenly, the idea of changing laws is possible. We could just change the German Grundgesetz, because, oh my God, it's like we have an emergency, so let's deal with that. Let's bring in all these things that have been put into our constitution, into our laws, in order to, protect in general, and to make us a, democratic nation that is interested in peace and security. And now suddenly this all seems to fall by the wayside. How does that play out in Norway?
When we can just go like 2 weeks back in time. I think Norway was not the only country at all, but we, in our laws, are not allowed to sell weapons to a country at war. But we sent weapons, as many other countries in Europe did. We were one of the last countries, because it was a difficult decision, because it was breaking our long-term rules, and we had just been witness to what weapon have done. I mean, just it's like 1 year ago since we left Afghanistan. And Norway played a really, really central role in bombing Lebanon, and the reports from there, Libya, and the reports from there are horrific. So that's in our memory, but this were not our war. This was Putin, and we felt very, very sorry from Ukraine. So we did. So we broke a rule there, and we are also breaking, most likely, a very central rule about these foreign military bases on Norwegian soil, which is a part of US military wanting to place even more foreign bases in Europe along the border of Russia. And this is at the table as we speak. And the political climate was, before the invasion of Ukraine, not necessarily in favor, but they are now. And that makes me ask a lot of questions, and not wanting to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but it's very much different to sell US politics to Europe right now than it was a month ago. So what we will is to give up, most likely, 5 locations to 5 different bases from the south to the north, where it will be American jurisdiction ruling, and we have nothing to say. And it's also, for me, difficult, because United States are not member of Hague. They are not member of any international law, and they are able to do whatever they want in these spaces now. And we know what they did in Lithuania and Guantanamo, and so I'm very skeptical to these bases, and of course also up against sharing a border with Russia, because that makes us vulnerable, it makes us a target, and it breaks this friendly role that we have played for such a long time. Yeah, it's like a never-ending story. Then we will bind ourselves 10 years to this agreement, and it's going to be difficult to break it when you have built them. And we never know who will be in charge, who will be the president after Biden. So yeah, I'm very, very against these bases. Yeah.
So what you're describing is actually a potential like hurting of Norway's sovereignty, like actually breaking Norway's sovereignty by creating these spaces that are outside of the law, that are under US jurisdiction, and are not actually like will be at the same time, they will be sold as securing a border, but they also make it impossible to make this border secure, because it's also to some extent an act of aggression towards Russia. So it undermines the bridge building ability of Norway completely. Like it makes it becomes a situation where it becomes sort of a wild catch-22, in which Norway becomes a similar pawn acting with potential conflict between Russia and the US or the NATO troops or whatever you want to call it, and actually endangering Norway's security to some extent more than it actually protect. That sounds.
Yeah, but I don't know. These numbers, the last polls says that 86% of the Norwegian population believes that NATO and our friendship with the United States is for our best. It will help our security of the nation. So this has been rising a lot since after the invasion. So yeah, it's a little bit difficult to be against at the moment, but I mean, we saw the same kind of thing back in 1948 when we signed the agreement with NATO, that it was people against. Like the Labour Party split back then, and we made a party called SV, Socialistisk Left Party, and because of this immense propaganda from the outside, it was not possible to have perspectivism on this. So, and we see that now as well. But what I hope for is that the peace movement that has been for a long time been up against NATO and United States can now unify with the enlarged peace movement that has mobilized against Russia, because our main goal is to have less or none weaponized war. that we have to work together on this, because Russia, United States, and China are superpowers, and they have the same. I mean, it's the same more or less. It's not a big difference between them anymore. I mean, Russia and Soviet Union is two different things. I mean, China, Russia, and the United States are hardcore neoliberal systems, right? That do not listen to their public, that do not distribute power. A superpower is not a democratic construction. So the people that want social democracy or democracy needs to don't believe in any of these systems that they are proclaiming it's going to save us and be the way to democracy, because that is just a lie.
I would ask, where does that leave Norwegians if 85% of them believe that NATO is actually protecting them, though? Like, why is, I mean, it's not that Russia approached Norway and asked whether they could build bases on their grounds, even though it is against the law. It is not China that has, like, I don't know, bases outside of China in all places in the world, militarizing certain borders. That's not China. That's not like even Russia. We can argue about what Putin might want to do versus what Putin is in fact capable of doing. And I think there is a vast difference. I think there's a vast difference between the U.S. Military potential and the military spending and the actual military power of the U.S. Compared to Russia and or China. And so I think it would be I think it would be not quite so easy to compare the military power. Again, we can talk about ambitions, and ambitions have to some extent deal with wishful thinking. So yes, maybe I don't find this line of argument particularly interesting because I don't like psychologizing over leaders. Maybe Putin wants to run an empire, but realistically, he is not capable of doing so.
No.
So it becomes sort of a uninteresting question. It is less uninteresting. So double negative. It is more interesting to actually look at the mechanisms with which we are being told that that NATO will be securing us and defending us, and how we will believe this, and how we give up, as you just said, likely give up sovereignty, likely allow the stationing of weapons in our European countries. I mean, how more weapons increases the chance of peace is a paradox that cannot, I mean, there's no logical explanation. And while it has become very obvious, and I think this is what we're at the moment also talking about in all of our spaces, how this war that in the Ukraine has actually led to a very visceral and emotional reaction in all of our spaces, and has brought people to, suddenly suddenly shout out war is peace, because only with war can you secure peace. I mean, we need to expose this as a completely wrong. This is the wrong direction for any peace organization or any peace movement. It can't be solidarity and peace will not be accomplished on the back of a thriving weapons industry and of more military bases along some wherever border. Actually, so sorry, I just wanted to say, you are a part of an anti-war coalition. You are active in that struggle. How do you do it in Norway? How do you actually bring to people's attention that they shouldn't let that happen, that this is a dangerous road to go down? What is your work about? How do you live and work and struggle in that
direction? No, I mean, out there, it's a lot of good peace organizations that we collaborate with. World Beyond War, International Women League for Peace and Freedom, Stop War Coalition in the UK. It's really, really large and powerful. and Stop NATO, we also collaborate with. But we are not funded, we are not invited to any table. So what we are starting to do now is to invite people to our table. What I tried to say earlier, that it's like repeating up against history. It's the campaigns, the propaganda, no, and they are working. But unfortunately, the campaigns are towards this imperialistic worldview. So the campaigns need to change. Now we need to have images, rhetoric, energy, people to draw up and make it clear how absurd it is to use weapon to gain peace. All these things needs to be drawn out clearly, and it takes time, but it's to change, of course, and it needs some momentum. We had a lot of momentums like in 1991, but we didn't use it. So it was bad politics, and we see bad politics now as well. We see it all the time. I mean, nobody dares to go in and make compromises. I mean, this war in Ukraine could have been stopped a long time ago. We knew about this already when Putin had the speech in 2017 in München. I mean, it's just stupidity, and it makes us think that it's economical based, no? It's difficult not to think so, because it's just insane. But how do a peace movement work today? I mean, we need to get we need to believe in ourselves, and we need to draw up our own vision, not go against any of these other superpowers. And because you're against the United States, then it's like Putin is not that bad or China is not that bad. I mean, forget about this. We need something totally new. So all illusions are dead now. So that's a good thing, no? So hopefully nobody will defend any of this anymore. Yeah, that's what I have to say about that.
A little bit, can you talk a little bit more about, because I think it's a really good opportunity to learn about the work that you are doing in Norway and your initiative. Do you want to talk a little bit more about the practical work that you are currently engaged in, just so that we get the full picture and know what's happening currently in Norway around this level of, I don't know, awareness raising, education, also, I don't know, activities, mobilizations. I mean, if they mobilize 30,000 soldiers, come on, is there an equal force of Norwegians speaking up against?
I wish. Yeah, I wish you could say yes. Yeah, well, I went into the organization in 2018. It's when it was funded, and I was kind of hijacked by Bjarne Larvik, who had the idea. He was missing a peace movement in Bergen in Norway, because it had not been very active since 2003. Because then all over the world, we saw the peace movement very strong after the invasion of Iraq. So a lot of people were missing this. And of course, like in any rich and fairly secure and well-functioning country as Norway, the aggression and the fights mobility is not very high, right? So of course it is especially difficult to mobilize in this context. Even so, it was during the Trident Juncture NATO exercise in northern Norway that I myself, together with some other colleagues within contemporary art, got to borrow the main stage of the National Theatre, where we drew up the NATO star and then placed the people within this NATO star and discussed NATO's main, why it was funded, because when you read the NATO declaration, it's quite interesting and ambitious, but then when you see the real facts, it becomes another story, more and more for every year that goes. So this way of inviting different voices to listen to each other, have time to talk and pay attention to these important issues is a big part of my interest and the organization interest, because that's what we lack. We lack the ability to listen and to think together. And that's very critical, especially now. I mean, everybody that's saying something critical towards NATO is ridiculed. And that is very, very dangerous, right? So being able to make meeting points for conversations with not only within the peace movement itself, of course, but to invite our political oppositions and people that has the ability to actually influence politics. So in the long term, that's also what I would like to do more and more of as the leader of Anti-War Initiative, is to actually lobby for peace. And in the government right now, it's only one party that is strongly against NATO. But this party is the third largest party in Norway at the moment. It used to be a small party on the far, far left, but they are now today the third largest party, which is very, very, very inspiring. So it's not impossible if you have good politicians that actually want to do good. So, and what else? We, of course, as an organization based in Bergen, we have been working against, not necessarily against, but yeah, of course against, but to inform the local community that we have this large military base, actually the largest NATO marine base, in more or less the city center, making us a target, and that we have an increasing number of submarines, which probably is carrying nuclear weapons, or at least have machinery running on nuclear weapons, which is also dangerous because we have had a lot of accidents in this area. And how is the security plan, evacuation plans, and all this? And we actually had this performative joke that we wanted to do, to send out like a letter to the public saying that they need to go and buy Jod tablets, which is actually happening right now. Like my child got a letter from school if they were okay with, if I was okay with them giving my daughter this tablet in case of nuclear war. That's what we have. That's our tools. Yeah, I guess it is. But that's like a joke.
That sounds actually incredibly frightening. And what I see or what I hear when you talk about these things is also that something that we need to, and that obviously your initiative is working hard against, is something about the normalizing of like, we need to get used to the idea that there's soldiers in the streets. We need to understand that we need to, I don't know, give our children medication to prepare them for the worst case scenario, etc., etc. So I think that this is an important aspect of the work that you are doing, to keep people like aware, make aware, and work against this normalization of that. This is what we should accept. For our security, we should accept all these infringements.
Yeah.
Our security, in fact. So that seems to be a really important lesson
Yeah,
In
I would.
general, yeah, please, sorry.
No, I just want to tell a little story about like the image that you used for this event was taken 5 days before the invasion, the 21st of February. And that was a day of many where we go about in the city center handing out flyers. This time was again information about the 4 NATO bases that it's about to come or that they want to install. And we have this long banner, and we walk around, have different appeals, and this time it was so many people that stopped and asked questions, went and asked for a flyer, and even said thank you so much for being here. These things are so important. And it was a big change that day compared to before. We even had like a former, what do you call it, Burgermeister, mayor, spitting, not at the, not on us, but on the pavement next to us when she passed us one Saturday. You know, so this Saturday was we were so excited, and we said, okay, maybe actually we're able to change that. We will not get these 4 American bases on Norwegian soil. Maybe it's a momentum here. Everybody was feeling a big change in the population until 4 days later. We had planned to go, but we could not even dare to walk in the streets. So now we are discussing what to do, how to approach this. So very thankful for this invitation. And we are making a round table conference in May, which we are calling a think tank for feminist foreign policy, to discuss what that could look like and how to front that. So we will invite politicians and policymakers, but also philosophers and peace scientists or researchers. So that will be super interesting.
Thank you. Yeah, please keep us informed. We will. This is also part of the. This is also. This is a good thing to talk about on the way to the summit in Madrid, where NATO will be discussing. I mean, I'm sure the NATO bases in Norway will be part of the conversation in Madrid as well.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Gitte, for taking the time and coming to talk to us today. I wish you and the Norwegian people success in fielding off the onslaught of more bases that are certainly not going to increase the security of the country or of Europe. I want to give a quick shout out to Intal in Brussels. They will have a peace and solidarity demonstration tomorrow. And if you're in Brussels or nearby, make sure to join. We will put the link in the chat. Also, a big thank you, as always, to People's Dispatch, our friendly People's and Movements media who are hosting us here. Soranya is the magician who makes it all happen sort of in the background. Thank you so much. Next week, we'll be speaking with Sean Connor and Rainer Braun from the International Peace Bureau, and we'll take a closer look at the sort of global, at the global NATO agenda. See you next Saturday. Tell your friends, and don't forget to fight NATO.
No, don't forget.
Ciao.
Thank you. Ciao.
Bye.